Hey, welcome to Behind the Beet. This week we're going over Hounds of Love by Kate Bush. Let's check it out. This entire thing is laid out in the Digitakt, so the Digitakt is playing drums and also sequencing two layers on the quantum, the pad and then those lower strings. For the drums, we're using 7 samples taken from a Linn drum. So here's a kick, a snare, 3 toms, and then a rim and a shaker. That pattern is just a 4-bar loop, so let's hear what it sounds like. The first thing you'll notice is that the shaker is playing 8th notes with a rim on the first beat of every measure. Then the kick comes in on the first beat and then the and of 2. On that and of 2, you add in the snare. And after that, you just need the tom pattern. So we have a high tom, a mid tom, and a low tom. Whenever that snare hits, you double it with the high tom. That's the same in every measure of the pattern. But beats 3 and 4, we have a tom pattern that changes each time. First we have the high tom on 4, and then the mid tom on the and of 4. In the second measure, it's the mid tom on 4, and the low tom on the and of 4. In the third measure, we repeat the first measure, so it's high, mid. But then in the fourth measure, the fill enters on the and of 3, with a mid tom, high tom, and then low tom. And then you want reverb on everything to give it that haziness. If you remember the video on Prince's drum programming methods, there's actually a lot of overlap here. Here we're also using a Linn drum, we're also using a high-passed reverb. We're also making use of the down-tuned rim shot, and using our toms and additional percussion to fill in extra space. So in this, the first half of the measure is dominated by the kick, the second half is dominated by the toms. This 4-bar pattern stays the same across the entire performance except for one section in between the pre-chorus and the chorus. There's a 2-bar transition where we just play the first 2 bars of the pattern instead of all 4. So let's hear what that sounds like. 1, 2, and then repeat. For the lead melody patch, it's pretty simple. We have a narrow pulse wave, and then an octave below we have a square wave with pulse width modulation. There's also a sub-oscillator an octave below that narrow pulse. The filter is mostly open with slight resonance. The amp envelope has a soft attack, a long decay, about maybe 2 seconds, and then 0 sustain. The main trick of this patch is the pitch modulation. So we have an envelope negatively modulating the pitch. So you hear that scoop up at the beginning of notes. That's an envelope with 0 attack, 0 sustain, and then a pretty quick decay. So you begin each note with maximum modulation, so well below your intended pitch, and then it scoops up to your intended note. So here's what it would sound like with a longer decay. It's a subtle effect, but it does add some expressiveness. There's also portamento to just add more of a vocal quality to it. And then to keep everything consistent, it's running through some reverb. For the two quantum patches, we have the main pad, which provides the chords and the bass for most of the song. And then we have this sort of bowed string sound. In the actual recording, I would guess that it's actual strings, but it could be samples from the Fairlight, which Bush was known to use. Here I'm using a resonator with a sine wave an octave below to reinforce the fundamental. There's some EQing going on as well, just to cut out the high end and low end and add some resonant peaks throughout the spectrum. This week on Synth Fundamentals, we'll be talking about formants, so I'll go more into how that works. And then the whole thing is run through a chorus to make it sound like multiple instances. That patch comes in during the chorus and plays AFF, AFF, GF. It repeats that 3 times, and then the 4th time it's AFF, AF, and then an octave up, FFF. So let's hear it. Then after that, we just have the main pad sound. That's a classic pad, so pulse wave with pulse width modulation, octave below, another square wave. The filter is mostly open with some slight resonance and full key tracking. There's a high pass filter just to cut out the low end, and then some chorus. The envelope is a little less sluggish than a regular pad, so the attack is soft but not slow. Sustain is about 80% with a long decay. Release is about a second or so. If you're playing large chords and have long releases, you can run into note stealing, so shortening your release is a way to kind of fix this before it happens. I'll include the chords and voicings I used in the description, but I just want to cover some interesting things that are going on in this progression. You can see this as divided into 4 sections. There's your verse, your pre-chorus, the turnaround, and then the chorus. The verse section is particularly interesting because you have a C that's sustained throughout the entire section, so it kind of colors each chord differently. You start with an F, and then a C, and then you follow it with a B flat. But holding the C throughout that B flat creates a B flat add 9, which kind of creates this ethereal effect. For the second measure, you have an F, a D minor 7, and then that same B flat add 9. What's interesting is that there's only a 1-note difference from the D minor 7 to the B flat add 9. It's just a change of bass note. And this is something that you'll notice in the chords and voicings that she uses throughout the song. There are a lot of shared tones between consecutive chords to keep everything moving as smoothly as possible. The other interesting chord technique that she employs is during the chorus. You have this alternating pattern between an A and a G in half notes with an F drone throughout the entire thing. But by changing the lower note in your voicing, you imply different chords. Initially, you start with a C, which implies an F add 9. Then that moves up to a D, which implies a D minor add 11. And then you drop down to a B flat, which implies a B flat major 13. And with that, you're ready to play Hounds of Love by Kate Bush. This has been Behind the Beat. I'm that beat. Thanks for watching.